Emily Clay.
Thank you. In the year 2000, I was working in San Francisco for a startup. And at that time, dot-coms were closing their doors all over the place. And I thought we might be next. So I had a few interviews, and then I had a difficult decision to make. I could either go with another tech startup, which at the time was no guarantee, or I could take a job with a respected news organization. Well, that startup was Google, and I took the US News gig. Now, a crystal ball would have been awesome, but the reality is we don't know what the future holds. And right now, we are in uncharted territory with journalism and technology. Looking at the landscape of how Americans get their news, it's mainly from social media, from search engines, and from messaging apps. So it's no wonder that there's more exposure to fake news and therefore more sharing of fake news. Now, to add even more complications to this, we have what's called a deep fake. And you're probably familiar with what a deep fake is, but it's basically a high-tech forgery. It's a computer-generated replica of either audio, video, or a photograph of something that happened, but it's not authentic. It actually did not happen, did not occur. So this has frightening implications for journalism. In terms of solutions, there aren't very many for fake news or deep fakes, unfortunately. So for the fake news piece, yes, Facebook has implemented their own AI program. And there's another company out of London called Fabula, and they have a 93% accuracy rate. What they do is instead of scanning for the content, for hate speech, things like that, they scan for unusual patterns to see what's happening, what's actually being shared, where the original rumor started, what country. And then in terms of deep fakes, they're getting more and more sophisticated, so it's really frightening. But there is one company called Face Forensics. It's not out on the open market, but it has a 98% accuracy rate, which is great, but you and I don't have access to it because it's only for the forensics community. So let's take a look at the University of Washington students who talked about how they developed a deep fake.
It got me thinking about my full-time employees and their ability to survive on $8 an hour in New York City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job or through Medicare or Medicaid. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women can get free checkups, and you can't get charged more just for being a woman. To give his employees came together to pass a common. There's a bill that would boost America's very, very hard times.
Some progress, at least within the small confines of the legal community. I think it's real important.
So part of the difficulty is they're getting more and more sophisticated. So what I mean by that is there'll be a computer scientist who will say, oh, that's a deep fake because people don't blink when they're not talking. And then another computer scientist will say, oh, I fixed it. Okay, so it's really difficult to unravel these. And it's just something to be aware of. And so if you're seeing a video and it elicits an emotional response, just, hold tight and make sure that it's authentic. Now, on a happier note, AI is used in several different ways in the newsroom and has been for years. So the shining example is the Washington Post. And really, no shocker there, right? Because Jeff Bezos bought them in 2013. He knows a little something about AI. So Washington Post has written 850 articles using what they call robo-journalism. And by robo-journalism, I'm talking about mundane tasks, mundane articles like election results, sports scores, financial reports, things like that. The LA Times uses it because they pull data from the Geological Survey and they're able to publish an article about an earthquake that happened in 3 minutes after the earthquake has subsided. So it's pretty incredible, and it also means generating more content and getting a bigger audience and possibly more advertisers. And the next example is customizing and personalizing. So I don't mean just customizing a chatbot, although that's lovely. It's more about customized content. So from a newsroom and from a paid subscriber standpoint, it's things like being able to get a customized video if you want one. So I'm obsessed with Shaun White. I know he's retired now, but the snowboard Olympian. So if I said, hey, I want a customized video on Shaun White, they can give it to me based on the data, based on what they know about me and my obsessiveness with Shaun White. And so as a paid subscriber, that would be a benefit. And then in terms of augmenting and supporting journalists, there's so many different examples, but there are a couple that stood out to me. One, AI is used to moderate comments, get rid of the dirty words and the hate speech, all of that junk. But then there's another one that's relatively new, and there's a company called Recordly, and what they do is they take a journalist's audio and they move it to text. So in the past, they used to have to interview and then transcribe the information, and it used to take hours. So let's take a look at the future.
Hello, everyone. I'm an English artificial intelligence anchor. This is my very first day in Xinhua News Agency.
So the first Anchorman made with AI. So I don't know if I should be creeped out or think it's really cool, but it does make me want to ask a lot of questions, and it makes me just confirm in my beliefs that we have to have a strategy in place, whether it's a brand that you're working on or a news organization. So the first idea I have around this is just the issue of transparency, not only internally, but externally. So for your audience, even consider having a tab that says AI 101 instead of privacy policy, talking about what is a data set, what is a neural network, and what are you going to do with my data, and then giving them the option to opt out. I know that might cause a lot of groans, but we're probably headed in that direction anyway, so you might as well start early and develop more trust. And then the other idea is around engagement. And so what do I mean by that? Well, once you have your audience, once you have your consumer, there's so many different touch points that you can use with AI. And one of those that I found out about is called data visualization, which is super cool. So you can take a really complex topic, such as how to develop a deep fake, and it will give you the information on how to do that, but in visuals, okay, and graphics, and really simple sentences for someone who's not a computer scientist. So the first example of transparency is really from the newsroom perspective. So after the Las Vegas shootings happened, the shooter was misidentified at first, and that kept going to the top of the Google search engine. So after that incident, Google was really angry about that and decided to come together with what's called the Trust Project. The Trust Project is an independent entity that has a bunch of news organizations, and they determine the standards of transparency in news organizations, okay? And so they came up with 8 indicators so that Google could reward, and by their algorithms, the legitimate news organizations. So the 8 indicators, what I'm talking about is things like the author's full name, their bio, maybe the angle that they're coming from on an article. And then the example down here that I have is from the Washington Post. So being able to call out a perspective or an analysis or an opinion so that everyone knows, hey, this is an opinion, this is an op-ed piece. This isn't fake news, it's just different, a different kind of news. And then the next example is really about engagement. A International Business Times journalist used a face mapping algorithm in order to cover these women's faces. And it's via Snapchat, but.
I was 5 years old when it happened. लोग मुझे ज़बरदस्ती मैसूर लेकर आए, मुझे एक कमरे में बंद रखते थे, मुझे बहुत काम लगा, बहुत टॉर्चर्स देते थे, घर में से बाहर निकलने नहीं देते.
Snapchat firstly gained an element of trust because the survivor had control over which filter they were going to use to hide their faces, and unlike a normal production process where you would later blur out the faces, they could look into the phone like a selfie, like a mirror, and see that the process of hiding their identity was taking place right before their eyes. So it gained trust and a much more sincere relationship between myself interviewing them and them telling perhaps the most sensitive, emotional story of their entire lives.
So this is an example of a good example of face mapping algorithms, but we've all read in the news recently about what China is doing in terms of face mapping algorithms, and they are tracking the Uyghur Muslims. So that's a humanitarian issue and something that we should all be aware of, and how AI is being used, not only in the United States, but everywhere throughout the world, because it can be scary. So I have a few takeaways. The one is about transparency and the importance of that, whether it's internal or external, building strong relationships, and then as a result that will build trust. And then having a code of conduct and ethics in place before implementing AI. And the other one is about embracing technology and collaborating, and really making sure that your values align with whoever you collaborate with. And then the last one is more of a call to action. You know, if you want to see journalism thrive, then subscribe. As Ann Curry would say, why on earth would good journalism be free? Thank you.